Hello and welcome back to In Between Sessions, the podcast about what you can do between therapy appointments to support your mental health. I'm your host, Lili, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in Kansas City. I'm especially excited about today's episode because we're doing something a little different today. We have our very first guest host joining me. Caby Montgomery is a licensed professional counselor here in the Kansas City metro area, and just as importantly for this episode, she's also a mom to a fantastic 13-year-old boy. I brought Caby in because this conversation needed a parent in the room to bring their perspectives and insights. And she brought not only her clinical lens, but also her own deeply personal experience to the table. Our guest for today is Emilia Mense Caby, who is a founding board member of the Whole Parent Foundation, a Kansas City nonprofit dedicated to providing free, accessible mental health support for parents at every stage, from pregnancy through, well, all of it. Emilia is a community advocate, educator, trauma survivor, and mother of 5, and she has spent her career working with thousands of community members on trauma, resilience, and mental health. After experiencing debilitating perinatal anxiety and depression following the birth of her 3rd child, she helped found the Whole Parent Foundation to build the support she wished had existed for her. It's apt that May is Parental Mental Health Awareness Month, because in this episode, we talk about the very real mental health crisis parents are facing. Did you know that mental health conditions are the leading cause of pregnancy-related deaths in Missouri? Because I sure didn't. We also talk about what postpartum anxiety actually looks like. Spoiler, it's not always what you think. Why the village we keep talking about doesn't really exist for parents anymore, and how the Whole Parent Foundation is trying to change that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Emilia and Caby. Emilia, what have you been doing in between sessions?
Oh, that is such a good question. I have been trying to connect with my breath, trying to find like mini moments of meditation and mindfulness. I am a parent. I have 5 children. My house is very loud at all times. So a 20-minute meditation is great, but even like a 30-second deep breath is really helpful.
I love that. I think one of the most common themes that I talk about on this podcast is the feeling of like what counts, whether it's exercise, like doesn't count if you're not sweating, or if vegetables don't count if you put ranch dressing on them. And like the narrative that meditation doesn't count unless it's like at least 20 minutes. You're in a perfectly silent seated position. You are Zen. But I love the idea that, yeah, like sometimes a deep breath is really enough.
And sometimes it's sitting in my meditation space while my children play and climb on me, and that's okay too. And it's okay if I don't ever get fully connected with me, but I'm still slowing down and connecting, and it still helps.
Yeah, I love that. Lowering the bar so that it feels like achievable and that it doesn't feel so overwhelming that then you don't do it, because that's the alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that's
exactly.
Right.
I love that. Caby, same question. What have you been doing in between sessions?
I've been doing a couple of things, actually. One of my favorite things to do when it comes to sort of the mindfulness thing that I try to do every day, but I often fail. But I try to do gratitude a lot. I find that having a gratitude practice is basically magic for me. It makes me feel better. It makes better things happen in my life. I feel better about everything. And there's a lot of science and research that backs that claim up, which is really fascinating too. So I try to do that. I have a cue that I give myself. I have a favorite tree out by the parking lot where we park here at the office. And every time I walk by that tree, I always start counting like thank yous in my head. And so I try to remember to do that every day, walking to and from my car. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But the other thing that I've been doing is I've been spending a lot of time with my son, which really has such a positive effect on me. He's 13 and he is just the funniest. I don't know. I absolutely adore him. And we've had a lot of really great moments lately, especially with spring break. And so, spring is upon us and then summer, and I'll have more time with him too. And so, yeah, those are the 2 things that I think I've been doing most.
That is so refreshing to hear because, I know we're here to talk about parenting today, and I know we're going to get into the hard parts of parenting because of course those exist.
Totally.
But I think especially our cultural narrative about teenagers is that they suck. And
True.
which yes.
2 opposing things can be true at the same time.
Exactly. I'm sure it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but to hear someone just be like, spending time with my 13-year-old kid is like really joyful and something I'm grateful for. Like, it is really refreshing. And I think like the fact that you shared those two things of like your gratitude practice, because so much of gratitude really is just about the act of noticing. And so like noticing what you enjoy about hanging out with your 13-year-old, I think, contributes to that appreciation for him and who he is.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, thanks for noticing that.
Yeah, and thanks for being our first ever guest host, bringing your expertise and parenting experience and knowledge to the group. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking, period. But one of the things that I love talking about is parenting. And I know I only have one kid, so I'm by no means an expert, but I had such a difficult entry into motherhood. And I'm happy to share a whole bunch of that, as we go farther into this conversation, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate, when they start to hear my story and Emilia, whatever, your stories of parenthood and postpartum and things like that. It's important. It's a major conversation, and I'm thrilled to be able to be here to participate. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. I mean, again, I appreciate that you started off the parenting conversation on a positive note, and I'm sure we'll hit more positive notes as well, but it's just really great for me to have both of you in the Zoom room today to talk about this because, while I am a pet parent and that is important in its own right, I don't have any kids of my own. And so I knew I wanted to do an episode on parenting because I see in my clients and my friends and my family members the impact that being a parent can have on people's mental health. And then I was lucky enough to come across the Whole Parent Foundation, I think on Instagram is how I found y'all, and see the amazing work that you were doing and was like, this just feels meant to be. So Emilia, will you tell us a little bit more about the Whole Parent Foundation and what y'all are up to?
Yeah, I love hearing that because I run our social media. So I'm like, yes, we found new people. We found our people.
Yes.
Yes. So Whole Parent Foundation is a local Kansas City nonprofit. We are really focused on parents' mental health through all stages, but especially in the postpartum perinatal phase. We are really working to, create a world in Kansas City, in Kansas and Missouri, where all parents have access to compassionate, culturally appropriate, trauma-informed, perinatal trained mental health support and therapists. And there is quite a lack of that, honestly. There's huge gaps in care in our, metropolitan area and across the state, in rural communities especially. There's just a huge lack of access to care. So we have free weekly support groups. Once a month, we meet in person in downtown Kansas City, and the rest are via Zoom. We want our groups to be as accessible and inclusive as possible. So, our in-person groups are on a bus line. We provide free childcare. We provide diapers and food. We have board members who will connect you with, resources if you're looking for assistance in any kind of way, because parenting is so much more than our mental health, but our mental health is such a huge piece of it. So we have those groups. We do them also every other week via Zoom, so that if transportation is an issue, if you live in a part of the state that doesn't have a support group like this, anyone can join. It's totally free. There are no barriers, or we try and limit the barriers whenever we can. It's an open group. You can join at any point. And really, it's just, we're there to build community, to allow parents to talk about the good and the bad. We don't sweep ugly feelings under the rug, but we also celebrate the joyful moments. I think what Katie said is so important, that you can hold two truths at once. And that is so much of what parenting is holding the truth of how much you love your children and how much joy they bring you, and also the truth of how insanely hard it is. And so we just want to build community around that. We do a lot of psychoeducation, skill building, and we also have a free therapy program where our participants can apply for 5 free sessions of therapy. We connect them with local therapists that we've vetted and connected with. And therapy is a luxury, unfortunately, right now. It shouldn't be, but it is. So our groups are really meant to kind of fill that gap for families that don't have access to therapy services, or maybe therapy service, it's not the one end all be all of mental health support. That peer-led, community-based support is also such a huge piece of it. So yeah, we also do a lot of advocating, policy advocating. May coming up is Parental Mental Health Awareness Month, which is super exciting. Missouri was the first state in the country to recognize it as Parental Mental Health Awareness Month as opposed to Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. And some of that is a shift in language. It's about being inclusive of all birthing persons, all support persons, all parents and caregivers. Part of that is also acknowledging that support persons face mental health challenges through postpartum and perinatal as well. So Kansas City also for the last several years has proclaimed May as Parental Mental Health Awareness Month. So we love to talk about all things parenting and mental health.
That is so great, Emilia. I'm curious about the therapy that is provided to people who want it for free. I would guess that there's probably a lot of people who are interested in that. And so you said 5 free sessions or up to 5 free sessions. So it sounds like it would be sort of solutions-based, kind of, obviously time-based. But I'm curious, what does that look like for the application process if anybody's listening who actually would really be interested in finding a free resource?
Those are great questions. So a couple things. 5 free sessions is where we're at right now. We're hoping to expand that because, research shows 5 free sessions is not enough. You're right. That is a very short-term piece of the puzzle. So we are looking for funding to expand to like 8 or 10 sessions, which is a little bit more research-backed. But part of it is like bridging the gap. So if therapy feels so hard to access, I am a parent who, can afford my insurance's copay sometimes. And it still felt like, especially when I was in those really heavy days, it felt completely inaccessible to seek out a therapist, to find one that would give me good, advice on mental health in this period.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. How do you even go about that when you're in the throes of postpartum depression and anxiety?
So part of it is that connection piece. Part of it is trying to find folks who maybe do offer sliding scale or have interns that can take different types of pay, finding clients or providers that take Medicaid, which is challenging. So that is part of it, trying to connect them because we have folks come through and then they're at their 5 sessions and they're still needing support. And we have flexibility. So we've been able to extend sessions and work with providers. But yes, that's definitely a gap because 5 sessions is not enough.
One quick question to follow up. I'm sorry. This just occurred to me. Is there a space for therapists to donate their services? I mean, I know they'd have to be licensed in the state of Missouri since you're in the state of Missouri, but is that a possibility as well?
So yes. And we've had therapists that will offer to take less than because we want this to be sustainable for therapists as well. But yes, we are willing. We've had therapists donate hours for if we have an upcoming self-care mini fair for parents. And so we had a therapist that's donating so many sessions to be raffled off. So that's totally an option.
That's very cool.
Yeah. We have a lot of times we have therapists that will have an intern under them that they are overseeing. And so they can provide services for donated or for free. So yes, that is a possibility. And if you're a local therapist, please reach out. It's on our website. You can reach out if you're interested in partnering with us. You also asked about applications. So participants just have to have attended at least one whole parent group. So that could be virtual or in person. And then we have applications are only open, we have a rolling application. So they're open about quarterly. And so when our applications are open, we share that, through our listserv with our participants, they apply. We have kind of a vetting survey or a vetting process where we kind of go through all the applications and look at need and we do a couple of screening tools and then, we connect them with the therapist and we try and do as much of the behind the scenes work as possible. So we give them a list of therapists, local therapists that they can choose from because sometimes it matters, what part of town they're in or do they offer virtual or
Absolutely.
Are they a Black queer woman? Sometimes those pieces matter.
Representation matters for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we offer, a list and they can choose and then we pay the provider. We do kind of all that background work. So yeah, it's a great program.
What an incredible organization, Emilia. It's just
Thank
so
you.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like y'all are doing amazing work.
Thank you.
And you mentioned a couple of times this aspect of the community piece, through your groups and that it's peer led and all of that. And I think community is a word that a lot of us associate with parenthood of it takes a village to raise a child. But it is so not how especially our country specifically shows up for children and for parents. And so, yeah, I'm so curious, how you guys at Whole Parent Foundation go about like creating that community, and then the impact that you see that having on the people who are benefiting from it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think if I were to like pick a piece of our programming that this is the most important, I would say it's the community piece. It's the community that we've created with the help and support of our families, because it is not just the organization, but it's really the families that come to us. You're absolutely right in we say that it takes a village, and yet, especially post-COVID, parents in the United States are more isolated than ever before. Yeah. There is no village, especially if you can't pay for it. You know, a lot of our current focus is on what doula or PT or services you can pay for, which is wonderful for families that's an option for. Yes, you need all the support you can get, but for so many of us, there is no village. Especially we have families who, you know, they don't have grandparents in town. They don't have in-laws that they can use for support. They don't have friends. They've just moved here. And parenthood is isolating enough as it is.
God, it really is.
And so often in our groups, so our groups are peer-led. We have trained facilitators. We have a curriculum that we use that's evidence-based, but it really focuses on what is the community needing and where are they at? It's a very conversation based. I often, when I'm facilitating, I often remind participants that their input is just as important, if not more important than mine or than our curriculum. That other families, the real gold behind it is that support that they're able to give one another, that validation that, yes, I've experienced that too. You're not crazy. You're not alone. It is hard. That I think is the most important part. And when we can build community, it's more accessible. It's easier for, it's more sustainable, because the reality is that not everyone has access to therapy, but anyone can come to a free group. And it's scary and it's hard, but I think I love to read our testimonials. We have families who have been with us for years. And I think that really speaks to the support that they find not only in the education, but in the relationship building, because you cycle through the content. You hear the same stuff, and they will always say or often say, oh, I heard that again, but it totally hit different. We have about 2 to 3 years worth of content. And we have families who have heard things again. And it's like it hit totally different. I'm in a totally different space of parenthood. It meant different things, but also that what they get from one another and that support and that, you're not alone in this. It feels really lonely, and you're not alone. Even when you're up at night feeding your baby and your partner's asleep and the house is quiet and you feel like the night will never end, you are not alone in that.
Yeah. Gosh, that takes me back to postpartum days. I'll tell you what, would it be helpful for us to maybe normalize some of real experiences that have maybe happened? I'm happy to talk about my experience just for anybody who is listening and needs a little bit of, validation to hear what it can be like. We see the media sells us about bill of goods, about parenthood, about motherhood, about giving birth, about what those first few moments are like. And it's all skin to skin contact, and it's all worth it because, the bond that you have with your baby is so wonderful. And for the people who have those beautiful birth experiences, I am thrilled for them. Mine was, Lili, are we allowed to cuss on this program, or does that get edited out?
Absolutely. Please help yourself.
Mine was a fucking shit show. So I had a textbook pregnancy. It was perfectly healthy. I was perfect the entire time. I went a week over my due date, and the doctor said, blood pressure's looking a little high, so we'd like to induce you and come on in. And that's what I didn't want. I didn't want an induction. Nobody wants an induction, right? Because we know that leads to a C-section, and that's just a longer recovery. And I didn't want that. And I just wanted to have the baby and just be done. No. So I went in and was induced. And for 30 hours, they kept trying to get me to go into labor. And my uterus was contracting because they were giving me Pitocin and Oxy and all of these things, Cytotec and all of this stuff. And then they said, well, you're still dilated to a 0. And this was after 30 hours of me contracting and not ever making any progress. I'm exhausted. I haven't slept. It's terrible. I'm 1,000 months pregnant. I'm humongous. And then they said, well, we can try one more thing. And it's basically inserting a Foley cath into your cervix and inflating it with saline. And that will manually open your cervix. And so we tried that. And that was so painful because it just hurts. And then they were sort of confused as to why it was painful. and delayed in my pain med. They did give me some pain med, but then I was out. I was like, that's it. I'm done. Just give me a C-section. I don't care. Finally had a C-section and had complications after they pulled my son out. My son's healthy as a horse. I mean, he's 9 pounds, 3 ounces, screaming like I don't even know what the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life at that point, but they could not get me to stop bleeding. And so they wound up working on me for a while, and I didn't get to hold my son for a good 15, 20 minutes, which was kind of a bummer. I'm in there, I'm strapped to a gurney. It sucks. It's bright. It's loud. It's just overstimulating. I feel terrible. They finally get me squared away. They give me the baby. Everything's a fog for the first 12 hours. And then I keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And so I wind up with 2 blood transfusions. My blood pressure skyrockets. I'm in the hospital for a week. They think I'm going to have like strokes and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, I was a mess. Like I very literally almost died. He, meanwhile, is fine. He's totally fine. He's the loudest baby in the nursery. He would come to me. The nurses would bring him, every couple hours to nurse and to feed. And so I would, and then he would go back because I needed to sleep. They finally released me about 7 or 8 days after I have him. We go home and I did not know what to do. The entire time I was in the hospital, I had more anxiety than I'd ever had in my life. But I got home and it was doubled. It was doubled. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I could not imagine taking care of this baby. I haven't bonded with him. I don't know what to do. I live with my husband at the time. I'm divorced now, but my husband and I lived in Indianapolis, which is not our home base. We lived there for his job. So we had some friends and my parents had come up just briefly, but they weren't there and I had no one. And I have anxiety anyway. I mean, I'm just somebody who runs pretty high on the anxiety scale. And so those first few days at home were hell, living hell, because I thought I cried more than I think I've ever cried in my life. And I had so much fear and so much anxiety. And I don't know if people understand, like postpartum depression is one thing. That sucks, right? I had that. But the postpartum anxiety is something I was not prepared for at all. I didn't even know that was a thing. I just thought anxiety was anxiety. But there is a specific kind of torture that is postpartum anxiety. And it got to a point where I just had a shot of fear hit me every time I heard him cry. And I thought, and this is how messed up your brain gets from all the hormones and everything. I thought at that moment, in those first few weeks, I thought he was my baby, my newborn baby who's 2 weeks old. I thought he was judging me. I thought he knew I wasn't a good mom. I thought he understood that I was terrible at this and that he was in the wrong place and he had accidentally gotten sent to the wrong mother because this lady's crazy who was trying to take care of me. She does not have her shit together and what is going on. And I didn't know how to communicate that. And my husband at the time was wonderful about, helping and being there and being a dad and all of that. He was great, but it was a really traumatic experience. I mean, it's traumatic enough being born, I would guess, but being born to a mother, and I have a lot of guilt still, to a mother who was scared of him. Like I was scared of my baby and I wasn't ever afraid I was going to hurt him or myself. But there were instances where I looked at myself in the mirror crying, saying, I made the wrong decision. I should not have had a baby. I should not have done this. I should not have done this. And then there were instances, I remember a specific day. My son's birthday's in September, and it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks after he was born. Beautiful September day. And I was rocking him in his room, and I looked outside, and there was this couple walking their dog. And I remember thinking, I would give anything in my life to be one of those people right now. I cannot imagine ever getting out of this. This is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, it was that bad. And I've never told my son this, so hopefully he doesn't really listen. But he does know, he won't. If it has to do with me, he's going to be like, nice. He's 13, everybody. He could give a shit. He's busy doing other more interesting things. But he knows that I almost died, and he knows it was really bad, that I had postpartum depression and anxiety. But I say all of this story because I want people to understand that sometimes that's what normal is going to look like. You might feel like shit. And I'm one of those really annoying people that go up to new moms and instead of saying, isn't this the most wonderful time? Because it's not the most wonderful time. I look at them and I say, how are you doing? Are you okay? And sometimes I'm like, they look at me and say, yeah, I'm doing great. Like, this is magical. And then other times I'll kind of get the look of like, no, actually, this kind of blows, because it does. And especially when you're alone, which is what you were kind of talking about, Emilia, about the community and having that support, I just think, God, that could have been so helpful for me back in 2012 when I gave birth. But I also don't know. I was in such a terrible headspace. I could barely get myself, I couldn't eat. I lost all of my pregnancy weight within a month. I mean, it was crazy. It was just a horrible, horrible situation. The good news is that my 6-week postpartum appointment, I begged to get back onto Lexapro, and they were like, sure, no problem. They didn't, I know they try to screen for postpartum depression and anxiety. I didn't ring any alarm bells for them. I don't think I would have even felt comfortable saying how bad it was for me at that time. I think there was still such a stigma. So I got back on Lexapro and birth control, and that regulated me a little bit. And I started to feel a little bit better after about 8 weeks, but it was a long couple of months there at first. And then it took a good year for me to feel, maybe 2 years to feel normal again. And then now my son gets whatever he wants because I feel guilty. So it works out for him too. So he's fine. I'm kidding. He doesn't. I mean, he does because he's an only child, but he's also a great kid. And that's the other thing, is like, two things can be true at the same time. That was literally the worst experience of my life, physically and emotionally. And also, he is the best person I think I've ever known. Like, he is just this incredible kid. And I am just thrilled beyond measure that I get to be his mom. And so those two things can exist at the same time. Well, not at the same time, because I didn't feel that at the beginning, but they can coexist. And so if you feel that way, if you feel like you are just drowning, there are resources. There's so much help to be found. The Whole Parent Foundation clearly has programming and groups and community. And I would also imagine, Emilia, that a lot of the people that participate make good friendships that last and that continue on throughout their children's, formative years.
Yeah, I think so many things when you're sharing your story ring true for me. And I think the biggest piece is that normalization. You asked, would it be helpful? Yes. Such a huge part of the community is that validation, is that normalizing your experience, that you are not broken because that is the experience that you had. And so many parents come into parenthood feeling like there's something wrong with them, feeling like they're broken, that they are not the right parent for their child. We often say, you are exactly the right parent for your child, and you have within you everything that your child needs. And sometimes that feels untrue, right? And the reality is that we need to be able to say that. We need to be able to say the ugly, scary things, because unfortunately, maternal mortality, yes, hemorrhage and high blood pressure and hypertension and all of these things affect it. But in Missouri, the leading cause of maternal mortality is underlying mental health conditions. It is suicide, substance abuse, domestic violence.
I believe
so we have to be willing to have those hard conversations with our providers, and our providers have to be better educated and better supported. They need to do better screening. They need to know, what do I do if I have a client that screens high? Because a lot of pediatricians and OBs don't screen because they don't know what they would do with a high number.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. That's just crazy.
And I hear what you said. You said something about how you were in such a dark place that even if there had been a community like Whole Parent, it would have been challenging to reach out to them. And I think that's another really important piece to bring up, because with my experience, I have many pregnancy, postpartum experiences. All of them have been challenging. All of them, I am also an anxious and moody person. So like, it goes with the territory. But I had a pregnancy where I was so anxious during pregnancy. Oftentimes we feel like postpartum depression starts afterwards. No. Postpartum anxiety is huge.
I had it my entire pregnancy.
Yeah. And it starts early. And I had a provider and I had mothers that I was friends with that said, you need to go back on your medication. You need to tell your midwife how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And I did, because I didn't know that was an option. I had stopped taking Zoloft because I was trying to get pregnant, because that
I
was
didn't
a healthy
know I
thing
could
to
get
do.
back on. And in 2012,
Yep.
they didn't have as much research back then as they do now, which is okay to stay on an antidepressant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
And
anti-anxiety.
we have incredible perinatal psychiatric providers in Kansas City. Missouri has a really amazing program where you can call in if you are a provider who doesn't know how to medicate a pregnant person. You can call in and get psychiatric consultations so they can tell you when it is safe to take which medications during pregnancy.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. So like we have a lot more resources than we had before. But had my midwife dismissed me, not followed up, not asked the hard questions, because when I brought it up to her, I said, I'm really anxious. I can't stop worrying. I can't stop cycling. I can't get out of the vortex. And so she asked some follow-up questions that were important. She asked, do you ever consider hurting yourself? You know, has that thought ever crossed your mind? And she asked it in a compassionate and caring and non-judgmental way.
Yeah.
And the answer was yes. And I told her that. And she was able to connect me with, it was pre-COVID. So she was able to connect me with a support group that she was running out of the hospital that she worked in, that I was able to start going to while I was pregnant. Because you are right. Had I had that baby and not already, and it was COVID once I had him, so that all blew everything up. But if you have a baby when you don't already have that community, it is really hard to step into a new community with all your vulnerabilities and all of your fears and anxieties and show up as you are. So I think that education, that, you know, finding families when they're pregnant, when they're trying to conceive, when they're thinking about family building is such a huge part of it, because that process in itself can be daunting and terrifying and anxiety inducing. But if you're not connected into a community already, it can be really hard to reach out, even when you know the supports are there.
Yeah. Yeah. God, that's so amazing. This would have been so helpful for me in Indianapolis 13 and a half years ago. If I could turn back time.
Well, and you both have mentioned like this idea of reducing the stigma, because I think what I'm sort of hearing you talk about is like 3 distinct stages of parenthood. The like pre-pregnancy of like, I've definitely had clients who are like, you know, even just deciding whether or not you want to have kids, like that's pre, right? And then, you know, starting to try. And then if you're having fertility issues, that whole journey. And if you're not having fertility issues, the whole like every month, like is now the month? Am I pregnant now? Like, is my life about to change right this month? And then the next stage being, you know, pregnancy and postpartum, like that whole time of life. And then like the rest of parenthood, really. And obviously there's stages within all of those things. But I think each has its own sort of expectations and stigmas around it. You know, people talking about like pregnancy and like you're glowing and like, oh, I love being pregnant. And like that sometimes is very much the narrative. And then being like, wait, this sucks and I hate it and I never want to be pregnant again, even though like maybe I love my child or I want to have more children. But then, I mean, I always call it the Waitress moment. If you've ever seen the movie Waitress or like the musical Waitress, literally the song that she sings when she has her baby is called Everything Changes. And like the first line is like, today's a day like any other, but I am changed. I am a mother, in an instant. And so like that is sort of the like the thing that people picture of like, you're going to have the baby and you're going to hold them and your whole life change for the better, because your life does change, but it's not always for the better. And, you know, in that musical, they then skip all of, you know, postpartum and they go to when the child's like 5 or 6 years old and they're very happy. They own a pie shop and everything's great. And it's like, what happened in between there, huh?
Well, which is a real missed opportunity, especially because the violence in that relationship. Like, unfortunately, I mean, that is a reality. Like, pregnancy is a really dangerous time for mothers in unhealthy relationships.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like you said, it's a leading cause of mortality.
Yeah, and she decides to go it alone, which like, awesome, great, but like also super challenging. So total missed opportunity. But I think that like each of these stages just has these like high expectations. And I do think we're getting to a place where people feel more open and willing to talk about it more. I even had a friend who I checked in with her after she had her baby and she was like, I love my child so much. He is amazing. He is perfect. I love seeing, you know, him discover the world, but like I've never loved babies and I like can't wait for him to be a little bit older. And I was like, it was really refreshing to hear someone be that honest about like, Yeah, I just prefer like older kids, and like my kid is no exception. And so again, I think that there is a lot of stigma around that like
I resonate with that, Lily, too, because I love little babies, but once they're mobile, well, I also want them to sleep through the night.
that does seem to be the
But
thing
then
about babies.
once they don't sleep. And then once they're mobile, I'm like, oh no, now I gotta like find them and catch up with them. And it's so hard. And then I don't know, every stage is so different. And I just remember when my son hit about 3.5, 4, he got hilarious. And it just got to be so, I mean, he was always funny, but like, I mean, that's really when the personality comes out and it's really fun. But to your point, I've noticed in my clinical practice with some of my clients who are parents of younger children, not teenage children or older kids, but some of the younger ones, it's kind of a relief for them, when it's time for school, in the fall, and they're like, oh, I just am excited for the routine. And then I have other sets of parents who are so excited for the summer because they get to spend more time with their kids. And now I feel like now that my son is older, it's so much more fun to hang out with him in the summer. Although now he doesn't want to hang out with me. So turnabout's fair play, I guess.
The cruel irony.
It is, isn't it? I mean, that's just life. But anyway, maybe he'll want to hang out with me. Who knows? But yeah, it's just everybody is different, and you will, if you're a parent and you're listening to this, you're going to find those sweet spots that you really, really enjoy, and then enjoy them, because there's going to be another developmental stage right behind it that you're probably not going to love quite as much. but
that's
okay.
It's
equally important, and that's okay too. And there really isn't it's not bad if you say you don't enjoy parts of parenthood. Are awful. Parts of parenthood suck. The worry of your child all the time, the constant anxiety of whether they're going to get sick or if they're hurt, of this world, of the larger world. We're all sitting here as women of privilege because we're all white, or at least white presenting. And I just wonder how many clients at the Whole Parent Foundation don't have the luxury of just the system being built for them. And so I know you mentioned the multicultural part of this, Emilia, and I think that is such an important part to sort of highlight in the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that having that safe space and that safe community to be able to say, even people that don't experience postpartum depression, you have moments of parenthood that suck, and you need to be able to say, this sucks, this is hard. Nobody likes to clean poop off of butts. Like, there's nothing joyful about that. And that's true for every aspect of parenthood, And so, yes, I think that having a safe space where you can say those things is important. I also think, and we have these conversations all the time, having a space that truly feels safe, where you can actually say the hard thing that you're feeling and not feel judgment for it. Because you're right, many of us, especially, depending on the circumstances of our family life, depending on, what we are also dealing with alongside parenthood, it just makes the world a lot less safe. It makes it a lot less safe to be honest about what we're experiencing. Yes, we've come a long way. We can talk about the baby blues and postpartum depression, and people have an understanding of that, but like, there's still, the rage that comes with postpartum anxiety. And that is something that is really not socially acceptable, and that is just absolutely a facet of postpartum anxiety. It is part of your mental health challenge, but to feel like, you may risk your family breaking apart, losing your kids. I mean, the system is not built for all of us. And we have, we're mandated reporters. We have to have hard conversations sometimes when our families are having challenging moments. And I remember a board member said once, when speaking about a family, if this family wasn't white, we would be having a different conversation. And so I do think it's so important to always keep that at the front of mind, that I am a white woman. I am very privileged just with the random factors that I was given at birth.
Mm-hmm.
My reality is not everyone's reality, and my reality is hard. And so constantly thinking about, what barriers to accessing mental health support are our families experiencing, and how can we lessen them, and how can we meet them where they're at in a way that's not infantilizing, that's not
not patronizing.
Exactly. Yeah. A really important part of our programming is we don't make assumptions. We meet families where they're at. We allow them to be in control of their care and their journey and their support. And I think that's just really, really important.
I love that. I think it gives, everybody who participates in your programming a sense of autonomy and personal accountability and responsibility, which feels really good, when you're going through this, because it makes you feel more confident in your skills as a parent and in your decision making. And also the one thing that I know you said it earlier, but it's also on your website, is the removal of barriers. So because you're in downtown Kansas City, being on a bus line is incredibly important, especially as we're trying to, encourage more public transportation and things like that. I think that's amazing. So removing those kinds of barriers, removing the parking issue, the driving issue, making sure that there's always a virtual session that's available for people who are outside of Kansas City, Missouri, who can't make it and are in a small town in rural Missouri. I just think it's amazing. You guys are doing incredible work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's when you talk about like rural Missouri, we also just this year started a statewide expansion so that we can meet those rural communities where they're at. So
cool.
We have spoke organizations in the Boot Heel, over in St. Louis, in kind of southwestern Missouri, in some of those more rural communities.
Yeah.
Because parents in Kansas City are experiencing is not the exact same thing that a parent in rural Missouri is experiencing.
Right.
And so, trying to recreate this community throughout the state is really important to us because, unfortunately, those maternity care deserts exist, and that's true for the physical care, but it's also true for the mental health care and support that parents need and don't have access to.
Yeah, Lili and I went to grad school together, and we were taught about that as well, the lack of care, mental health resources that rural communities face. And so it's not surprising that mental health and maternal mental health is facing the same thing. So, wow, you're just doing incredible work there.
Yeah. And I would also consider that, you talked about like multicultural competencies and humility within your organization. And like, I would consider, like you said, the people outside of Kansas City aren't necessarily experiencing the same thing. Like it's a different culture with different cultural expectations. But then, yeah, also when we talk about like different races, different cultures of origin, like parenting is one of the biggest like cultural differences of like what's appropriate, multi-generational households being like normalized in some cultures over others, things like like kids sleeping in bed with you, things like how long it's appropriate to breastfeed or whether you do or not, like all of that has like cultural implications. And like, it's important that there's so much shame associated with like quote unquote bad parenting. And so like to have providers and people who are understanding of like something that I may perceive as like not being, ideal parenting, like could actually be like a cultural difference that I'm not being sensitive to.
And I think that's so important. We talk about trying to come from a non-judgmental place as often as possible. And so we often say, within our group, it's not about whether you breastfeed or formula feed or co-sleep or sleep train or, any of those things that, like the mommy wars that culturally and from like a media standpoint are just like omnipresent, it feels like. But really, how can we connect across those differences? Because whether you breastfeed or co-sleep or formula feed, you still like have mental health challenges. Like that is something that is true across the board. So yeah, I think definitely coming from a non-judgmental place. And also sometimes that means calling in, even during group, hard conversations. If we set an expectation at the beginning of our groups that our groups are a safe space for all parents, regardless of race, regardless of sexual identity, regardless of gender identity, regardless of nation of origin or immigration status or any of the things. And it doesn't feel safe for all of those folks to parent right now. And so we are really intentional about creating a safe community where hurtful comments are not tolerated. But if a hurtful comment is said during group, we call that into conversation. And we call into, really reflecting on our language choices, reflecting on, who we're talking about, reflecting on the assumptions that we all have, because that's a huge part of the parenting experience. If I'm parenting, if I'm a queer parent, my experience is different than a straight or straight passing family. So yes, I think that we are definitely always calling those conversations in. We're also really intentional about like, what does our board look like? Who has a voice in our organizational leadership? Who has a spot in the table in the room where we're making decisions about programming? Because if we don't have those voices, then we don't have someone reminding us that this would be a different conversation if this person looked different or parented differently or whatever it is. So it's really important for us to, like, we're constantly thinking about what does that look like, and how do we make sure that the community that we're serving is also represented in our leadership.
Yes. I love that.
Amazing. Yep. I think it's great.
I'm curious, Emilia, if someone's listening to this and they're at, any of these stages of parenthood, like maybe trying to conceive or thinking about having kids, or they're pregnant or in postpartum, or, they have a 13-year-old and they're recognizing the importance of their own mental health as parents. What is something that you would encourage them to think about doing, or kind of a starting point for prioritizing their own mental health as a parent?
Yeah, that's huge. I think so. It can be big steps. It can be seeking out a therapist if you don't already have one, or talking to your midwife or OB about support services in your area, coming to a whole parent group, signing up for services on our website so that you can get the emails, and follow us on social media so that you can, see where we're at and potentially join us if that feels safe and comfortable. But also little things, who are you following on social media? Does it make you feel good about yourself as a parent? What does your internal monologue say? And can you shift it at all? Can you, instead of saying I'm a terrible parent, say I am a parent? Like, can it be neutral instead of negative? Like, I think those little shifts are really, really important, because especially if you're in it, it's hard to do the big things. But I would definitely encourage any local families and anyone who's listening who's not in Kansas City, to reach out to Whole Parent Foundation. Another wonderful national organization is Postpartum Support International. And if you reach out to your local coordinator, every area has a local coordinator. They are really skilled at connecting you with mental health providers that take your insurance, that are in your part of the country, that have received perinatal mental health training. So that's another wonderful resource if you're not local and you're looking for some mental health support.
Thank you for that. That's amazing.
It's a great resource. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear from both of you what you're going to do before your next session. Emilia, let's start with you.
I think I am going to put my feet in the grass. I feel like I need to get outside. I need to be grounded. I need to get in my body. I'm also going to be in my volunteer work, ramping up for our next session of Whole Parent Foundation groups, where right now we are in between sessions. Our next in-person group is coming up after Easter. So, getting ready for that and just enjoying life.
That sounds awesome. You're going to literally touch grass, non-derogatory. Yeah. Great.
No, I'm just going to go put my feet in the ground.
Love it. Amazing. How about you, Katie?
Well, now I feel like I need to go touch grass as well. So I may add that to my list. I think a really good thing to do today, especially since it's so nice out before the rain comes. I think what I'm going to do before my next session or in between sessions, I need to get organized. I feel a little discombobulated in my I don't feel very structured, which is good. I don't like a lot of structure. I like to be a little loosey-goosey about things, but I think my looseness has gotten a little too loose. I think I rein it in just a little. So I think I might just try to find a smidge of structure in what I'm doing in the next week or so.
I love that.
TBD.
That sounds amazing and so balanced, and probably a lot like parenthood.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if it happens. I may just wind up on the couch with M&Ms and a Diet Dr. Pepper. I don't know. We'll see.
Sounds pretty great to me.
That also sounds
I know.
Nice.
I mean, listen, I'm pretty loosey-goosey about stuff, guys.
Oh my gosh. Thank you both so much for taking time today. It was so great chatting with you both. And I feel like I learned so much about parenthood and mental health and all of the incredible supports that are available through the Whole Parent Foundation. So thank you, Emilia, for representing Whole Parent Foundation. And thank you, Katie, for bringing your incredible lived experience and perspective to this episode. I really appreciate you both.
Oh, so happy to do it. Thank you so much for asking.
Thank you both. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. That was Emilia Mense Caby from the Whole Parent Foundation and our very special guest host, Katie Montgomery. And I'm so grateful to both of them for the honesty and heart they brought to this conversation.
A theme that kept coming up in this episode is the good old therapy adage, two truths can exist at the same time, which just feels so true for parenting. You can love your child with everything you've got and also find parenting incredibly hard. You can be a wonderful parent and also be struggling. Those things aren't contradictions. It's just the messy truth about parenthood, and the more we're able to say that out loud, the less alone parents feel. So, your in-between sessions homework this week depends on where you're at. If you're a parent yourself who is struggling right now, or even just curious about what support might look like, I invite you to take 5 minutes this week to look up the Whole Parent Foundation and see everything they have to offer. I'll even make it easy for you. The link is in the show notes. And if you're not in the Kansas City area, check out Postpartum Support International. They have local coordinators all over the country who can connect you with perinatal mental health providers who take your insurance. That link's in the show notes too. And if you're not a parent, or if you are a parent but you're in a good place right now, your homework is to think of one parent in your life who might be in the thick of it and reach out to them. It doesn't have to be a heavy conversation. It can be something as simple as texting them a reel that made you think of them, or inviting them to grab coffee, or offering to drop off dinner on their porch. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone who is struggling is just to remind them that they exist to us outside of their role as a parent, that someone sees them. That's it. That's the whole homework. And if you know a parent who's in the thick of it right now, you could also share this episode with them. It might be exactly what they need to hear. Thanks so much for listening. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next time in between sessions.